They said they wanted me there. Swore up and down it wouldn't be the same without me. Fly out, Grandma, they said. We want you here for Thanksgiving. So I did. I packed the pie dish. I packed my cardigan. I packed every ounce of softness I had left. And then I waited. Gate 3A at Minneapolis, St. Paul Airport. I stood beneath the arrivals sign, my wheeled suitcase upright beside me, my coat folded neatly over one arm. People rushed past with flowers, balloons, children clutching handmade signs. Some were hugging. Some were crying. All of them were being claimed. I stood there like a misplaced package. The flight had landed 42 minutes ago. I checked the board twice. I reread the text from my daughter-in-law 3 times. We'll be there. Kids can't wait to see you, Redheart. I had replied. Flight lands at 3:10. Can't wait to hug everyone. No answer. I didn't put my coat on because it was warm inside. I didn't sit down because sitting felt like giving up. Like surrendering to the idea that maybe I wasn't coming home with anyone after all. I didn't want to look like a woman who'd been forgotten. My phone buzzed. Not a call. Not a text. A social media notification. My heart jumped anyway. Not because I cared about those things, but because sometimes that's where my family posts pictures before they remember to call me. I opened the app. There they were. Greg in the navy sweater I sent last Christmas. Meline smiling wide and sun-touched, the way she always does. The kids, Elliot and Ruby, crowded around a long wooden table. Candles. Turkey. Mashed potatoes. Pie that wasn't mine. All of them holding glasses mid-toast. The caption read, Full house, full hearts. Happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours. I studied the photo again. There was no mistake. There was no seat waiting for me. I didn't cry. Not then. I turned around, slipped my coat on, and began walking past the taxis, past the shuttle signs, out of the terminal. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I wasn't going to stand there any longer waiting for someone to remember me. 3 days earlier Greg had called. That alone should have warned me. My son doesn't usually call. Unless there's a birthday, a bill, or a problem. This time his voice was syrupy, overly bright. Hey Mom. You doing anything for Thanksgiving? I told him my plan. Stay home, roast a small chicken, maybe bake a pie if my hands cooperated. Watch an old movie. Nothing fancy. Just me and the radio. He paused. I could hear him thinking. Well, he said, the kids were asking about you. Thought maybe you'd like to come here this year. Everyone will be together. It wouldn't feel right without you. Wouldn't feel right without you. That line lodged itself somewhere tender. It's been a long time since I felt wanted. Not needed, not depended on, but wanted. There's a difference. So I said yes. I found a flight. Greg didn't offer to book it or reimburse me, and I didn't ask. I still had the envelope of Christmas money tucked away for emergencies. I decided this counted. After we hung up, I sat there with the phone in my hand, fingers curled around it, trying to remember the last time I'd felt truly excited. Not anxious. Not obligated. Just excited. It had been years. I booked the ticket that night. Non-stop. On sale. I even paid the extra $12 for more legroom. Silly maybe, but if I was crossing the country I wanted to arrive with a little dignity left. The next day I went shopping. Not just for gifts, though I did pick out 2 books for the kids and a box of dark chocolate truffles Meline used to like. I bought something for myself too. A navy cardigan. Soft wool. The kind that drapes just right and makes you feel like you might belong in the photograph. I packed 3 days early. Checked the weather. Turned the heat down. Took the trash out. I didn't tell my bridge group I was leaving. Too many questions. And maybe part of me didn't want. To tempt fate, I flew out Thanksgiving morning. The airport was packed. Rolling suitcases, neck pillows shaped like animals, people buzzing with anticipation. I smiled at a baby across the aisle. Shared a knowing glance with another older woman reading a paperback, both of us with our hands folded, both carrying stories no one had asked for. When we landed I smoothed my skirt and brushed crumbs from my lap. I'd brought my good shoes, the black ones with the tiny heel. I wanted to look like the kind of woman you invite. And I believed I was. Until I wasn't. The walk from baggage claim felt longer than usual. Maybe it was the suitcase. Maybe it was something heavier. I passed coffee kiosks, reunions, a young woman crying happily into her boyfriend's shoulder. I didn't feel angry, just displaced. Like the world had pressed pause on me while everyone else kept moving. Outside, the sky was that flat Midwestern gray that makes even the air feel tired. My phone was silent. 3:54 p.m. Dinner wouldn't start until 5 or 6. Maybe they were busy. Maybe the kids were wound up. Maybe the turkey needed basting. There were plenty of harmless explanations. Harmless things still hurt when you're standing alone at arrivals. I waited another 20 minutes before my knees protested. I sat on a bench, watched strangers climb into cars that knew their names. A woman brought her mother-in-law a hot chocolate and a hug. The older woman looked older than me. That hug landed squarely in the hollow of my chest. I tried calling Greg. No answer. I left a message, said I'd landed, said where I was waiting, said I hoped everything was okay. But I already knew. I knew before the app refreshed. Before the photo loaded. Before the cranberry sauce and candles and caption about full hearts appeared again. It wasn't the first time I'd been forgotten. It was the first time I admitted it. I stood, dusted off my coat, and pulled my suitcase behind me. No cab. No Uber. Just the sidewalk. A man pushing a stroller smiled at me. I smiled back. Strangers see you more clearly than family sometimes. By then it was nearly 5. The air sharpened, slipping under my collar like a quiet question. What now? I didn't answer. I kept walking. About half a mile out, just past the car rental return, I saw it. A squat little building with a flickering neon sign, Tina's Diner. Paper turkeys taped to fogged windows. Warmth leaking out. I went in. The bell jingled. The place smelled like grease and cinnamon. Yellowed menus. Vinyl booths. A counter with cracked stools. 6 people total. A UPS driver. An older couple eating in silence. The waitress looked up and said, "Happy Thanksgiving, hon." "Same to you," I said, surprised my voice didn't wobble. I slid into a booth near the window and took off my coat. "Kitchen's slow," she said, handing me a menu. "But we've got turkey and pie." "Pie sounds good," I said. "What kind?" She grinned. "Pumpkin. Pecan. Key lime. Pumpkin. And tea." "You got it." My suitcase sat beside me like a loyal dog. My phone buzzed once on the table. I didn't look. The pie arrived warm, whipped cream leaning slightly to one side. The tea was strong and a little bitter. Just how I like it. I took a bite. Then another. It was the best pie I'd had in years. Not because of the spices or the crust, but because I hadn't made it for anyone else. I ate slowly. I didn't rush. I didn't scroll. I didn't wait for apologies or explanations. They weren't coming. And still I was here. Breathing. Whole. Warming my hands beneath paper turkeys. When the waitress brought the check, she asked, "Want another slice to go?" I thought about it. "Yes," I said. "For later." She winked. "Best decision you'll make all day." She was right. Outside, the cold had teeth. I stepped back onto the sidewalk, pie in a white paper bag swinging from one hand, my suitcase rattling behind me. And for the first time that day, I wasn't waiting. I didn't have a plan. No hotel booked, no one waiting, but somehow I didn't feel lost. Not exactly. There's a kind of peace that comes when you finally stop expecting the people who hurt you to fix it. The wind picked up as I walked. It wasn't far to the nearest budget motel. I'd seen the sign while trudging from the airport. Valley Inn. Weekly rates available. Nothing fancy. A square, low-slung building with beige paint and a vending machine by the front door. But the lights were on, and right now that was enough. Inside the lobby, a man behind the counter was watching a football game on a tiny TV. He glanced up when I entered, his face a map of boredom and fryer grease. "Need a room?" "Yes. Just for one night." "Single," I almost added again, but I only nodded. My good shoes were scuffed from the walk. My cardigan smelled faintly of airplane. He slid a form across the counter. ID and card. While he typed, I glanced at the TV. Some team in red and gold was losing badly. The man didn't seem to care. "Room 114, he said, sliding a key across the counter on a flimsy ring. "End of the row." I thanked him and wheeled my suitcase down the sidewalk. The room was exactly what I expected. 2 lamps with mismatched shades, a bedspread patterned in muted browns, a television older than both my children. But it was warm. The heater worked. The bathroom was surprisingly clean. I peeled off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed. My feet ached. My back ached more. But my heart, the part that should have been shattered, felt oddly intact. I stared at my phone for a long time before turning it over. 3 missed calls from Greg. 2 from Meline. 1 text. Mom, where are you? No apology. No explanation. Just confusion. As if I had disappeared. As if I were the one who forgot to show up. I didn't reply. Instead, I unzipped my suitcase and took out my notebook, the one I use for grocery lists and thoughts I never say out loud. On a fresh page I wrote, I am not spare. I am not extra. I am not a side dish at someone else's table. I stared at the sentence for a long time. Then I underlined it. A year ago, 5 years ago, I would have cried. But tonight the tears wouldn't come. What came instead was clarity. Like stepping into cold water. Shocking. Clean. It wasn't just this dinner or the airport. It was the years that led up to it. The birthdays they skipped. The voicemails left unanswered. The last-minute invitations that sounded like obligations, never joy. I remembered Christmas 2 years ago when Meline called and said, "We'd love to have you over if it's not too much trouble getting here." That pause in her voice. The way she said if. I made them a ham anyway. Took the bus. I remembered Greg's 40th birthday. I sent him a leather wallet with his initials engraved. He replied in a group text, "Thanks for the gifts, everyone." I remembered Ruby's school play. How I found the live stream myself and watched on my laptop with a glass of wine and a lump in my throat. She never knew I was watching. Nobody mentioned it. And still I kept showing up. Until today. Maybe it takes standing alone on a curb in a different city to finally see the shape of what's been there all along. I wasn't part of their life. I was an accessory. A convenience. A placeholder for when they wanted to remember their better selves. I looked around the motel room. Ugly, honest, functional. It was the most honest place I'd been in years. I made myself a cup of motel tea using the plastic coffee machine and sat cross-legged on the bed with my second slice of pie. No china plate. No linen napkin. Just a white paper bag and a plastic fork. And yet, it tasted like something I'd earned. A hairline crack ran across the ceiling above the bed like a road map. The heater wheezed and kicked. Somewhere nearby a man coughed, deep, wet, miserable. A toilet flushed. The wind scraped against the siding. It wasn't a peaceful night. But it was an honest one. Around 2 a.m. I finally drifted off, the scratchy blanket pulled to my chin, my notebook still open on the nightstand. I slept in the clothes I'd arrived in, too tired to change, too weary to unpack again. I woke before the sun. A habit I never lost. Even in retirement, my body insists on being useful by 6. I made another cup of weak coffee and watched the sky lighten through the blinds. The pie was gone. The tea too. But the quiet stayed. At 7:12 my phone buzzed. "Mom, I'm so sorry. There was confusion with the pickup. We thought your flight was tomorrow. Can you come to the house today? The kids really want to see you." No mention of the dinner. No apology for the photo. Just confusion. "And can you?" I set the phone down. I wasn't going. I got dressed, brushed my hair, dabbed on a little lipstick. It wasn't about seeing them. It was about dignity, about reminding myself that I still got to decide how I presented myself to the world. Even if no one was looking. In the lobby, there was a bowl of bruised apples and a carafe of coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard. I took an apple and slipped it into my bag. Checked out. The man behind the counter didn't look up from his football recap. Outside, the wind had calmed. The sky was a brittle November blue, sharp, high, endless. I didn't go back to the airport right away. A mile down the road, tucked between a gas station and a closed tire shop, was a small postal annex. Inside, I asked for an envelope and a pen. "Do you sell stamps?" I asked. "Of course," the clerk said. She was young, kind, with chipped nail polish. I addressed the envelope from memory. Emma Wexler, 12 Pond Hollow Lane, Worcester, Massachusetts 06009. My granddaughter. Greg's daughter from his first marriage. The only one who still called just to talk. The envelope stayed empty for a moment. Then I pulled a page from my notebook and began to write. "Emma dear, you once told me I was your safe place." Hearing that meant more to me than most things in this world. I wrote honestly. Not bitter. Not dramatic. Just real. When I sealed the envelope, I felt lighter. At 10:35, I booked a ticket home. Same airline. Same gate. Different woman boarding. I spent the afternoon in a cafe near the terminal with big windows and good scones, writing the things that had gone unspoken too long. I didn't write to Greg. I didn't call Meline. Around 4, the light turned golden. The kind that makes even parking lots look beautiful. I watched a little boy run toward a minivan, his backpack bouncing. He waved at his grandmother. She waved back, smiling. He grabbed her hand like it was his anchor. I whispered, not bitter, just clear. I deserved that too. The plane home was half full. I had a whole row to myself. I didn't bother smoothing my coat or tightening the seatbelt right away. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to make myself tidy for anyone else's comfort. The flight attendant offered a soft smile. Heading home or leaving it? She asked. Both, I said. In a way. She nodded and moved on. That quiet kind of understanding. As we lifted off, the city shrank below us, the runways crossing like faded scars. I waited for grief, for turbulence, but it didn't come. I didn't feel peace either. Not yet. But I felt still. Rooted. Present. Halfway through the flight, I turned my phone on. For texts from Greg. One voicemail. Mom, I'm really sorry. Please call me. I didn't listen to it. I didn't delete it. I let it wait. The way I had waited. Then I turned the phone off again. When we landed, it was already dark. My little city glowed in a way that was quiet and familiar. The shuttle driver who took me back to the parking lot was an older man with a twinkle in his eye. He asked if I'd been visiting family, and I smiled and said, not exactly. At home, my porch light was still on. I'd left it that way out of habit, as if expecting to return tired and full, folded into the warmth of family. Instead, I walked in with pieces in my bag and a mind sharper than it had been in years. The house smelled like lavender and old wood. The radiator kicked on with a comforting clank. I set down my suitcase and hung up my coat. I moved slowly, not from age but from intention. I made a cup of chamomile tea and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd hosted years of Thanksgivings, where Greg once spilled gravy and Emma once cut snowflakes from napkins, where Meline had sat tight-lipped, looking at her phone more than my face. I looked around the room like it belonged to someone I was still meeting. Then I opened the drawer next to the fridge. That drawer. The one with the files. The one labeled Greg, Emma, legal. I pulled out Greg's folder. It was thick: receipts, copies of checks, printouts of tuition assistance, an invoice from a mechanic I'd helped him pay when his transmission failed, the mortgage co-signing from 2010, the private preschool deposit I'd fronted for Ruby with a note in Meline's handwriting. We'll pay you back after the bonus hits. They never did. I turned each page carefully, like tending to wounds, not in anger, not even in sadness, but in clarity. Then I reached for the thinner folder labeled Emma. Birthday cards. Photo she'd mailed me. A printout of her college graduation announcement. Handwritten notes in bubbly ink. A thank you for helping her cover a course fee. A postcard from Vermont. Wish you were here. Fall is wild and wonderful. I closed both folders and sat back. Then I reached for my notebook. And this time I didn't write feelings. I wrote a plan. The next morning, I was at the bank before the doors even opened. A light frost coated the steps, making them slick, but I climbed them slowly and steadily, wearing my oldest boots and that same navy cardigan. The cardigan didn't match my scarf, but I no longer cared about appearances. I cared about action. The teller, a young man with kind eyes and a nervous smile, greeted me with the sort of politeness people reserve for the elderly. Good morning, Mrs. Wexler. How can we help you today? I'd like to speak with someone about my accounts, I said. All of them. He nodded, glanced at a screen, then called into the back. A few minutes later, I was ushered into a glass-walled office with soft chairs and the faint smell of printer ink. A woman named Natalie introduced herself as my account manager. She looked like someone who did yoga at lunch and always had almonds in her purse. What can I do for you today, Mrs. Wexler? I want to suspend all automatic payments. Every one of them. Starting today. She blinked. All of them. Yes. She tapped a few keys, her eyebrows rising slightly as she scanned the screen. You have quite a few recurring transfers to family members, tuition payments, car insurance. There are also scheduled gifts to charities. Keep the charities, I said. Stop the rest. There was a pause. Do you want to talk about why? I looked at her. Really looked. And to her credit, she didn't fill the silence with fake concern. No, I said. I've already spent enough time explaining myself. She nodded. Understood. While she worked, I sat in the quiet of that office and watched the world move outside the window. A mother wrangling a toddler into a car seat, an older man pushing a walker, a delivery truck idling too long. Done, Natalie finally said. Everything's been suspended. I'll prepare the paperwork for full cancellation if you want to come. Back tomorrow to sign. I will. She hesitated. There's also a power of attorney on file. Gregory Wexler. Do you still want him to have access? I felt my pulse slow, not rise. No, I said. Revoke it. Understood. She printed the form. I signed it with steady hands. By the time I left the bank, the frost had melted. I didn't rush. I stopped at the bakery on the corner, bought myself a fresh roll, and walked the long way home. It wasn't about punishing Greg. Not really. It was about drawing a line where I hadn't before. About recognizing that love doesn't grow from sacrifice alone. It needs light. It needs truth. Back home, I pulled the pie dish from the sink, washed it gently, and put it away. Maybe someday I'd make another pie. Maybe not. But I wouldn't make one for people who left me standing on a curb. That afternoon I called my lawyer. Mr. Altman had handled our affairs for over 30 years. He'd helped us buy the house, settle my husband's will, even draft the first version of mine back in 2005. His voice was warm but cautious. Mrs. Wexler, what can I do for you? I'd like to make changes to my estate, I said. And I want to establish a trust for Emma. Yes. He didn't ask why. He didn't have to. People like Mr. Altman have seen every version of family disappointment that exists. We set a time for the next day. When I hung up, I felt no triumph, no victory, just clarity. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders and tea cooling on the railing. A few neighbors passed by. One waved. One didn't. The street was quiet, and I felt not okay, not healed but steady. Like I'd finally stopped knocking on a door that was never going to open. The next morning, the sky was soft and low, that pale winter gray that wraps around houses like gauze. I dressed slowly, not because I was tired, but because I didn't want to rush what came next. At 9 sharp, I was in Mr. Altman's office. A little 2-story building with green shutters and a reception area that smelled faintly of old paper and floor polish. The same gold-framed photos hung where they always had. His children, his boat, his bulldog, and a Santa hat. He stood when I entered, still as polite as he'd been 20 years ago. Mrs. Wexler, he said, extending a hand. It's good to see you. And you, Mr. Altman. We sat in his office. Same leather chairs. Same ticking wall clock. Same stack of forms on his desk, though now his reading glasses were thicker, and his mustache had gone from salt and pepper to snow white. What are we changing today? He asked gently. My will, I said. And I want to create a trust. Everything I own, every asset, I want it protected. And I want it to go to Emma. Only Emma. He didn't blink, just nodded and pulled out a legal pad. I assume we're removing Gregory and Melline. Yes. They've had enough from me. More than enough. He looked up but didn't comment. I want it airtight, I continued. No back doors. No loopholes. Emma is the beneficiary. She gets everything when I'm gone. And until then, she can access the trust for education, housing, healthcare, or emergencies. I'll decide what counts as an emergency. Altman smiled slightly. You've thought this through. I have. And your home, your pension account, the CDs, all of it? If it has my name, it moves to the trust. And you want to retain full control while living. Of course. He leaned back. Emma's a good girl. Always was. Something tightened in my throat. She's the only one who still sees me as a person, not a purse. Mr. Altman didn't flinch at the bitterness in my voice. Then let's make sure your wishes are honored. For the next hour we worked through every item. He asked questions. I gave firm answers. No more uncertainty. No more benefit of the doubt. When we reached the end, he gathered the papers into a folder and looked at me with something close to admiration. I'll have the final draft ready in a few days. We'll get it notarized and it'll be done. Thank you, I said, meaning it. Outside, the air had turned crisp. I walked home slowly, stopping once to buy a small poinsettia at the florist. I didn't decorate much anymore, but I wanted something bright on the kitchen table. Something alive. The moment I stepped through the door, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Grandma. It was Emma. Her voice breathy, nervous, warm. I got your letter. I sat down at the kitchen table. You did. I didn't know what happened. Dad and Meline said you canceled your flight last minute. They made it sound like you just changed your mind. Of course they did, I said softly. I was there, Emma. I landed. I waited. I saw the photos. She went quiet. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I had no idea. I know, sweetheart. That's not on you. You didn't make that choice. She sniffled on the other end. I missed you so much that day. It didn't feel right without you. For the first time since the airport, tears stung behind my eyes, but they didn't fall. Not this time. Thank you, I said. That means more than you know. We sat in the silence together. Not awkward, just full. Grandma, she said finally, can I come visit next weekend? I have a break from classes. I'll take the train. My heart bloomed with something gentle and painful. Of course. The guest room is ready. I'll bring the chessboard, she said. You still play? I never stopped. We hung up a few minutes later. I sat there at the table, my hand still resting on the phone. For once I didn't feel forgotten. I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. That Saturday afternoon, I stood at the train station in my warmest coat, watching passengers step off the 11:37 from Worcester. The platform smelled like diesel and old rain. I clutched the paper bag in my hands, a sandwich and an apple just in case she'd forgotten to eat. And then there she was. Emma came off the train wearing an oversized hoodie and jeans, her dark curls tucked under a beanie, a worn canvas bag slung over one shoulder. She looked older than the last time I'd seen her, sharper somehow. But when she spotted me, her face lit up with something pure and unmistakable. She rushed over and hugged me like she meant it. It was that simple. No questions. No apologies. No tension curling in the air between us. Just her arms around me, tight and real. Hi, Grandma, she whispered into my shoulder. Hi, baby, I said. You're here. We drove home in silence for a while. She watched the streets like she was trying to memorize them again. I drove slowly, carefully, letting her take it in. The neighborhood hadn't changed much, but it felt different with her beside me. Back at the house, I made tea while she set her bag down in the guest room. She returned with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged, curling into the corner of the couch like she'd never left. The chessboard waited on the coffee table. We played a game. She won. Then we played another. I won that one. Fair and square. Later, we sat at the kitchen table, both of us nursing mugs of tea. The poinsettia I'd bought earlier that week sat between us, still red, still alive. I read your letter again on the train, she said, tracing the rim of her mug. I've never seen you write like that before. I've never had to, I said. I used to think being quiet was a form of grace. But lately I think it's just made me easy to ignore. Emma looked up at me. I never ignored you. I know. She hesitated. Dad doesn't know I'm here. I figured. He called a couple nights ago. Asked if I'd seen you since Thanksgiving. I didn't lie. I just said we hadn't talked yet. That was kind. She shook her head. It wasn't kindness. It was exhaustion. I'm tired of pretending things are normal. That surprised me. Emma had always been careful, diplomatic, the peacekeeper in her fragmented family. Hearing her say that calmly, steadily told me she was growing into something strong. You don't have to pretend here, I said. Not ever. She nodded. Neither do you. We sat in silence sipping our tea. And for the first time in weeks I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need Greg or Meline to grovel or explain or spin another story about what went wrong. I didn't need a text, a voicemail, or a too-late invitation. I had this. My house. My tea. My granddaughter. I had myself. That evening Emma offered to make dinner. She cooked pasta with garlic and spinach while I grated cheese, and we talked about everything and nothing. We watched a silly movie afterward and laughed too hard at parts that weren't really funny. Before bed, she sat beside me on the couch. "Grandma," she said softly, "I don't want to lose you." "You won't. Promise." "I can't promise forever," I said. "But I'm not going anywhere yet." She smiled and hugged me again. Gentler this time but no less real. After she went to sleep, I sat in the quiet of the living room. The clock ticked behind me, like a slow metronome. I looked at the pictures on the mantel. Some faces had faded. Some frames were empty now. But one photo still stood tall, me holding Emma as a baby. My hair darker then, my face softer, but my hands around her tiny body just as steady. I looked at it for a long time. Then I turned off the light and went to bed. Emma left Sunday afternoon. We lingered on the porch before her train arrived. I handed her a container of leftover pasta, a folded scarf I'd knitted last winter, and a quiet kind of love I didn't need to explain. She kissed my cheek and promised to call Tuesday. Then she was gone. A quick wave from the back window, her breath fogging the glass. I stood there until the train disappeared, then went back inside. The house felt quieter than usual, but not lonely. It was the kind of silence that follows after something important has been said. A silence with shape and weight. I moved through the room slowly, picking up mugs, folding the blanket, placing the chessboard back on the shelf. When I reached the kitchen, I opened the drawer again. The files sat where I'd left them. Greg's folder still thick with paper. Emma's still light. But it wasn't just about them anymore. It was about me. I pulled out a yellow notepad and began listing everything I'd paid for over the last 15 years. Not just money given directly, but the things I'd quietly covered. Home repairs, medical deductibles, legal fees, the down payment on Greg's second car after his first marriage ended, groceries when Meline was too tired to shop, school fundraisers I'd been guilted into supporting with a check instead of a visit. Line by line, I wrote them down. By the time I finished, the list stretched across 4 pages. It was strange. I'd never thought of myself as generous, just useful, reliable, someone who helped because that's what mothers do. But looking at the numbers, I saw it clearly. I'd subsidized their life, and in return they gave me politeness. Hollow birthdays, tired smiles, a chair near the coat rack when there was no room at the main table. I wasn't angry. I was done. At 3:17 p.m. my phone rang. Greg's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. A minute later a voicemail. Then a text. "Hi Mom. Just checking in. Hope everything's okay. Let me know when you're free to talk." No urgency. No specifics. Just a vague nudge, as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't left me standing at a curb in another city while he carved turkey and posed for family photos I wasn't meant to be in. I deleted the voicemail without listening. The text I left unread. That night I lit a candle. Not for an occasion, just for stillness. I poured a glass of wine from one of the good bottles I'd been saving for a real holiday. I set a single place at the table, heated a bowl of soup and sat. Not scrolling. Not waiting. Not hoping. I sat in my own life. Before bed, I opened my email and found the travel folder. At the bottom sat the receipt for my Thanksgiving flight. Round trip. Return complete. I forwarded it to myself and added a note in the subject line. Proof of departure and return. I didn't send it to anyone else. I didn't need to. The next morning I called Mr. Alman. "I've been thinking," I said. "I want to add a clause to the trust." "Of course," he replied. "What are you thinking?" "I want Emma to be the sole executor. And I want a letter attached, not legal. Personal. You can include a statement of intent," he said. "It won't change the legality, but it can explain your reasons." "Good. Then I'll write it." That morning I began. To whoever is reading this after I'm gone, if you're wondering why things were divided this way, let me say clearly. This is not punishment. It's honesty. I've spent my life giving quietly, consistently. But love without respect isn't love. Presence without care isn't family. I chose the one person who saw me before I vanished. I didn't finish it that day. Some things deserve to be written slowly. Tuesday came and went without a call from Emma. Not because she forgot, but because we'd agreed on it. She had clinicals that week and didn't want to be distracted. "I'll call Friday," she'd said. "After my shift." Same time. I trusted her. That morning, though, someone else called. Meline. Her name lit up my screen like a warning sign. I let it ring out. 30 seconds later, a text arrived. Hi, Irene. Hope you're well. Greg mentioned you've been hard to reach lately. Let's catch up soon. Catch up. We weren't old coworkers. We weren't neighbors borrowing sugar. I'd been her mother-in-law for nearly 15 years. I'd helped her find her first real job, sent care baskets after her surgery, paid for her mother's funeral flowers when money was tight. Catch up. I set the phone down without replying. Later that afternoon, another message, this time from Greg. Mom, Meline tried calling. We're starting to get worried. Can you just let us know you're okay? The irony. They hadn't worried when they left me at the airport. Not when I walked to a diner with frozen fingers. Not when they posted a photo caption everyone, with no seat left for me. But now when silence echoed back, they panicked. Silence is powerful. It unsettles people who are used to your noise. Your giving. Your yes. I kept the phone off for the rest of the day. That evening I went up to the attic, not for anything dramatic. Just to find an old recipe book Emma once asked about, the one with my apple crisp scribbled in the margins. I hadn't been up there in years. The boxes smelled of dust and old pine, and the insulation curled like forgotten paper. In one box labeled 1990 to 2005, I found the book, and beneath it letters, dozens of them. Cards from Greg as a teenager. Drawings from Emma as a child. Thank you notes from friends and cousins long moved away. A photo of my husband in his Sunday suit, holding a pumpkin pie like it was a prize. I sat down on the floor cross-legged, and let the past rest in my lap. So many pieces of myself I'd stored away to make room for others. I thought about Greg as a little boy. How he used to insist on sleeping with his head against my chest because your heart is louder than the rain. How he'd cry if I left for work too early. How I taught him to tie his shoes with 2 loops instead of 1 because it made more sense to him. I had loved him so completely once. Maybe I still did. But love doesn't excuse neglect. And forgiveness doesn't mean return. Not always. I put the letters back carefully. Closed the box. That night, when the house was dark and the world was quiet, I opened the notebook and added 2 more lines to the letter for the trust. I didn't want my final act to be polite. I wanted it to be clear. Emma, you saw me not out of obligation, not for what I gave, but because you chose to. That's what family is. Choice. Respect. Truth. The pen felt heavier than usual in my hand, but I wrote anyway. The next day, I drove into town and went straight to the notary. It was in the back of a shipping store, past shelves of bubble wrap and a rack of novelty greeting cards. The man behind the counter had kind hands and a long, careful way of speaking. His name tag said Dev. I need to notarize a letter, I said, unfolding the pages I'd written, along with some trust documents my attorney had prepared. He glanced at the first page, then back at me. Big changes. I nodded. Long overdue ones. He didn't ask more. Just handed me a pen and guided me through each signature with the quiet efficiency of someone who has seen all kinds of endings and beginnings pass across his counter. When it was done, I felt lighter. Not free, not yet, but clearer, like the road ahead had fewer turns. I stopped by the grocery store after. Picked up milk and oranges. A bunch of lilacs they'd marked half price, the kind of things you buy when life is steady again. When you're choosing your own peace instead of waiting for someone else to hand it to you. At home, I set the flowers in the chipped vase near the kitchen sink. The scent of lilac spread slowly through the house, soft and certain. I took off my coat, folded it, and laid it over the back of the chair. My phone buzzed as I was putting the groceries away. Greg. Mom, we really need to talk. You're not answering and it's making things worse. I don't know what's going on, but we're worried. Please call me. The message was longer than usual. The edges of panic showing, but still no real apology. No mention of what had happened. No ownership. Only absence. And now the discomfort of it. He wasn't sorry for forgetting me. He was sorry I had stopped filling in the blanks. I sat down, stared at the screen, then turned it off again. That afternoon I took out the folders once more, Greg's, Emma's, the trust packet, and locked them all in my fireproof box, slid it back beneath the bed. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I was finished. Finished explaining. Finished asking. Finished waiting. I made soup that night. Lentils, carrots, garlic. My hands still knew how to measure by instinct. I cooked for one, not for absence. I set the table not in mourning but in ritual. In respect. For myself. The soup was good. Later I sat on the porch again. Wrapped in a shawl, the air just brisk enough to feel like something shifting. As the streetlights clicked on one by one, I remembered a moment I hadn't thought about in years. Greg was 10. He'd come home from school with a split lip and mud on his jeans. Another boy had shoved him in the field during recess. He didn't cry, just stood at the sink, rinsing the blood off his hands, saying, "It's fine. It's nothing." I had crouched beside him and said, "You're allowed to be hurt. It doesn't make you weak." I wish someone had said that to me, because I had been hurt quietly, consistently for years, and I had let it go unchecked because I thought endurance was a virtue. But it's not. Not always. Sometimes it's just delay. Sometimes it's just the cost of silence. I sipped my tea slowly and let the night press in. The flowers in the kitchen swayed slightly in a draft, a blur of violet in the dark. Somewhere down the block a dog barked. A car pulled into a driveway. Someone laughed sharp and high, a sound from another life. And I sat in mine. No questions. No waiting. Just the weight of my own belonging. Finally whole. It was late Friday afternoon when the knock came. I was folding laundry at the kitchen table, towels mostly still warm from the dryer when I heard it. 3 slow raps. Not the mailman. Not a neighbor. The kind of knock that carries hesitation behind it. I opened the door and there she was. Meline. Her hair was too perfect, like it had been brushed and sprayed in the car. She wore heels too narrow for our sidewalks and carried a tote bag slung over one shoulder. Her face bore that curated expression I'd come to know, part concern, part performance. "Irene," she said, her voice almost tender. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer at first. Just stepped aside and let her in. She glanced around as she entered, as if expecting dust or neglect. The house looked the same, but something in the air had shifted. I knew it, and I think she did too. I led her to the living room. She didn't sit until I did. She placed her tote carefully at her feet and folded her hands in her lap. "I know you're upset," she began, her tone already polished. "And I just want to say this whole thing has been a huge misunderstanding." "Nothing," I said. She continued anyway. "Greg thought your flight was Friday. That's what he told me. We didn't realize you had already landed." "And the photo?" I asked. She blinked. "What?" "The Thanksgiving photo. The caption that said full house. All of you smiling at the table." She looked down. That was just something I posted for the holiday. I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did." She looked up again too quickly. "Well, yes, but I think we need to move past that now. The kids miss you. Greg's been calling. We're all just concerned. You've shut us out." I let out a small breath. "No. I just stopped filling in the silence for you. That's different." Her mouth tightened. "I came here because we want to make things right." I looked at her, then really looked. At the effort behind her makeup. At the impatience hiding in her posture. At the avoidance she wore like perfume. "You didn't come to make things right," I said. "You came to see if I was still useful." She straightened. "That's not fair." "But it's true." She glanced toward the hallway, as if Greg might appear and rescue her from the conversation. "I've given enough," I said calmly. "More than enough. And I've decided where the rest of it goes." That got her attention. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm not bitter. I'm simply finished." "Irene," she said, her voice tightening now. "This isn't like you." "I know," I said. "It's like me now." There was a pause. She shifted in her seat. "Does Greg know you've made changes?" "I imagine he's starting to suspect." Her face faltered. "And the house?" "Your accounts." The silence after that was dense. A kind of reckoning. Finally she reached for her tote and stood. "Well," she said, her tone clipped. "I'm sorry you feel this way." I smiled just a little. "No. You're sorry I stopped accepting less than I deserved." She didn't reply. Just turned and walked to the door. At the threshold she hesitated. "Greg really is worried." "He should be," I said. "Not because I'm gone, but because I'm not coming back." The door closed behind her with the softest click. I stood there for a long moment, my hand on the knob, the air still humming from the exchange. Then I went back to the kitchen, finished folding the towels, lit a candle and made a cup of tea. The phone rang once that evening. Greg again. I let it ring, not out of cruelty, but because the silence finally belonged to me. Saturday came quietly. I woke early, not because I had to, but because my body had settled into a rhythm again. One not governed by expectation or the noise of someone else's schedule. The sky outside was pale and soft, the kind of morning that doesn't press or promise anything. It simply presents. I took my tea to the porch and sat beneath the faded quilt draped over the back of the wicker chair. The steam rose slowly from the cup. Somewhere down the street, a child shouted, followed by the roll of a skateboard. Winter was still holding back. But not for long. I thought about Meline's visit. Not with regret. Not with anger. Just curiosity. As if I were watching someone else remember a conversation they'd never truly had. She hadn't come for peace. She came for control. And for the first time in a long time I hadn't given it. That was the victory. Not in winning. Not in being right. But in staying rooted, in no longer performing grace just to keep others comfortable. That afternoon Emma called. Her voice came bright through the receiver. Hi Grandma. I'm on break but I wanted to check in. How's your week been? Eventful, I said, sipping my second cup of tea. But steady. She caught the tone. Something happened. Meline stopped by. Oh. A pause. She said she and Greg wanted to make things right. Did they? No. Emma exhaled through her teeth. I'm sorry. Don't be. I wasn't surprised. And I wasn't shaken either. Another pause on her end. Then more quietly. You sound different. Do I? Stronger. I think I am. We talked for a while. About her patience, about a paper she was writing, about the cat who'd knocked over her favorite lamp. The everyday things that form real lives. When we hung up, I didn't feel that familiar ache of absence. I felt connected. Present. Full. Later, I spent the afternoon going through the drawers in the spare room. Not out of urgency, but because I finally felt ready to decide what mattered. I found a set of linens I hadn't used in years. Emma might like those. Then a pair of earrings, silver, simple, classic. I'd bought them years ago, saving them for Ruby's 16th birthday, back when I imagined her standing in front of a mirror, tucking them into her ears before a school dance. But gifts from me stayed unopened. Or disappeared altogether. I held the earrings for a long time. Not bitterly. Just finally. They weren't symbols of something lost. They were symbols of something that was never mine to hold. That evening I wrote in my notebook again. Not a letter this time. Just a list. Things I no longer owed. Explanations. Second chances to people who waste first ones. Apologies for taking up space. A seat at a table that won't make room. Silence. Then another list. Things I still have. My name. My peace. My mind. My home. My granddaughter's voice in my ear saying, stronger. I tore the page out and folded it in half. Taped it to the back of the cabinet door beneath the sink, where I kept the dish gloves and extra sponges. A strange place for strength. But real. That night I set the table for one again. This time I lit 2 candles, not because anyone else was coming but because I was there fully. I sat down, spooned out my soup and whispered, not for drama, not for pain, but because it needed to be said. I'm still here. And I was. The first Sunday of December, I decorated the porch. Nothing elaborate. Just a pine wreath with a red ribbon and 2 strings of warm white lights along the railing. I didn't do it for the neighbors. Or nostalgia. I did it because I wanted the house to glow for me. Inside, I put on the kettle, turned on the old radio, and let slow jazz drift through the rooms. I used to decorate for the kids. Stockings with their names. Cookies shaped like stars. The felt angel Emma made in kindergarten. But this year there would be no stockings. No extra chairs. No waiting. This year, I lit the fire early and set one place for tea my own. By the time the sun dipped behind the houses across the street, the phone rang. It was Greg. I answered. Mom. His voice was thinner than I remembered. I'm here, I said. Calm. Steady. A pause. I didn't think you'd pick up. I know. Another pause. Longer. I saw the paperwork, he said. From the attorney. The trust. The changes. I figured you would. His breath caught like he'd expected a different tone. I don't understand. After everything? I interrupted. He went quiet. You mean the money? He asked eventually. I mean the pattern. I replied. The forgetting. The late calls. The missed birthdays. The airport. The photo. That wasn't intentional. No, I said. It was worse. It was convenient. There it was, the truth out loud without apology. You're punishing us, he said. But it sounded less like an accusation and more like a hope. A hope I'd deny it. Reassure him. Fold. No, I said. I'm releasing myself. From obligation. From old loyalties that only moved in one direction. From the guilt I carried so long I forgot what lightness felt like. I never thought it would come to this, he muttered. I know. His voice broke. We're still your family. No, Greg. I was your family. You haven't been mine in a long time. And that was it. No shouting. No resolution. Just a truth said quietly enough to echo for years. I hung up and stood at the window watching the street lamp flicker on. The next day I mailed a small package to Emma. Inside, the silver earrings wrapped in soft cloth. A copy of the trust. And a note. These are yours. Not because you asked but because you showed up. Wear them when you feel uncertain. You're never invisible in this house. Not then. Not now. Not ever. She called 3 days later, crying and laughing at once. Grandma, she said, voice trembling. I don't know what to say. You already did, I told her. The day you asked if you could come visit. The day you came without needing a reason. That night, I lit the fireplace and sat in its warmth. Outside, the street was quiet, dusted with the season's first snow. I watched it fall slow and clean. I thought about all the Thanksgivings before this one. The ones I cooked through pain. The ones I sat through quietly. The ones I was invited to as an afterthought. And then this one, the one I gave myself. No carving knives. No tablecloths. No second helpings. Just a walk. A diner. A slice of pie. And the clearest thing I'd ever tasted. Not bitterness. Freedom. And if you're reading this, if you've ever waited for someone who forgot to wait for you, listen closely. You can stop now. You can light a candle for yourself. You can buy your own damn pie. And you can begin again right here, right now. If this story moved you, share it. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone. Your silence has value. Your seat is your own. And you don't need permission to keep it.